A girl found out her father's brother was hurt her father, and she planned revenge. In 2025, in New Orleans, Marie Dubois, a celebrity chef, runs Bayou Bliss, a Creole restaurant secretly used by her deceitful brother Antoine to launder money for crime boss Victor Landry. When Marie's daughter, Lila, overhears Victor's plan to kill Marie and take over the restaurant, Marie confronts and plots revenge against Antoine. The story begins. Everyone, please subscribe to my Sweet Revenge YouTube channel. The French Quarter pulsed with life. Its cobblestone streets slick with the breath of a Louisiana summer night. The air was heavy, laced with the sweet rot of magnolias and the briny tang of the Mississippi. Carried on a breeze that barely stirred the gas lanterns flickering above Bayou Bliss. Inside the Creole restaurant, the heart of New Orleans beat loudest. The dining room was a tapestry of sound, clinking glasses, throaty laughter, and the soulful wail of a Zydeco accordion spilling from a jukebox in the corner. Candlelight danced across polished oak tables, casting shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. At the center of it all stood Marie Dubois, 38. Her chef's coat pristine despite the chaos of the kitchen behind her. Her hands, scarred and steady from years of wielding a knife, moved like a conjurer's, tossing shrimp in a sizzling pan that hissed with butter, garlic, and a pinch of cayenne. To the locals, she was more than a chef, she was a priestess. Her gumbo a holy rite, her warm smile a balm for weary souls. But tonight, her dark eyes held a flicker of unease, like a storm cloud on the bayou's horizon. "Marie, darlin', this étouffée's got me speakin' in tongues," called old man Thibodeau from a corner table. His weathered face split by a grin as he mopped his plate with cornbread. Marie flashed a smile, her voice rich as molasses. "You keep sweet-talkin' my food, Thibodeau, and I'll have to charge you double." The room erupted in laughter. But her heart wasn't in it. She felt the weight of eyes on her, not the adoring gaze of her patrons, but something colder, sharper, from the bar across the room. Antoine Dubois, 40, leaned against the polished mahogany, his tailored suit gleaming under the soft lights. His grin was a crescent moon, charming and dangerous, the kind that could sell salvation to a sinner. He swirled a glass of bourbon, chatting up a pair of tourists with tales of voodoo queens and haunted swamps. His voice smooth as silk, but his eyes, glinting like oil slicks, darted to Marie, then to the back door where Victor Landry's men loomed like specters. Antoine was her brother, her blood, the boy she'd raised after their parents drowned in a bayou flood when she was barely 18. But he'd changed, his hunger for power outgrowing the small dreams they'd once shared. It was Antoine who'd brought Victor into their lives, turning Bayou Bliss into a front for the crime boss's money laundering scheme. Every dollar that passed through the restaurant's books was tainted. A betrayal Marie swallowed like bitter chicory coffee to keep her business, her legacy, alive. Another round for the table. Antoine, a businessman, slurred, waving a wad of cash. Antoine's laugh was a low purr. "Comin' right up, my friend. Marie's cookin' ain't the only magic in this place." He pocketed the bills, his fingers lingering on the cash as if it whispered promises. Marie caught the motion, her jaw tightening. She turned back to her pan, the sizzle of shrimp drowning out the bile rising in her throat. She hated this, hated Antoine's greed, hated Victor's shadow over her life, hated the lie she lived for her daughter. Lila, in the restaurant's back room. Lila Dubois, 18, sat at an upright piano, its keys worn smooth by decades of jazz and blues. She was a wisp of a girl, her braids swaying as her fingers danced, coaxing a melody from the instrument that felt like it had risen from the swamp itself, haunting. Wild, alive, her mother's fierce eyes burned in her face. But where Marie was fire, Lila was water, her music a current that could hush a room or sweep it away. Tonight, though, her notes faltered, her hands trembling as she played. She'd slipped out for air earlier, escaping the restaurant's heat, and overheard something in the alley, Victor Landry's voice, low and gravelly, cutting through the night like a blade. "Marie's gettin' too curious," he'd growled to his men, his silhouette hulking against the brick wall. "She's a liability. We end her, take the place for ourselves." Antoine had been there too, silent, his head bowed like a man already damned. Lila's breath caught, her fingers freezing on the keys. The notes died, leaving only the muffled din of the dining room. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of fear and fury. Victor was going to kill her mother. And Antoine, her uncle. The man who'd taught her to fish in the bayou, who'd snuck her beignets before dinner, had done nothing to stop it. She glanced at the door to the kitchen, where Marie's silhouette moved like a shadow play, unaware of the noose tightening around her. Lila's hands curled into fists, her nails biting into her palms. She had to tell her mother, had to save her, but the weight of the truth felt like a stone in her chest. The bayou had always whispered of secrets, of blood spilled in its waters. But Lila had never imagined it would claim her own. Marie felt her daughter's gaze before she saw it. She stepped into the back room, wiping her hands on a towel, her brow furrowing at Lila's pale face. "Baby, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with worry. Lila opened her mouth, but the words caught, tangled in fear. "Mama," she whispered, her eyes darting to the alley door as if Victor's men might burst through. Marie knelt beside her, her calloused hand cupping Lila's cheek. "Talk to me, Lila, whatever it is, we'll fix it." But the air between them crackled with dread, and Marie's heart began to race, sensing the storm that was about to break. Outside, the saxophone wailed on, its notes curling into the night like a warning. As the sizzling heart of New Orleans began to burn, the moon hung low over New Orleans, its pale light fracturing on the Mississippi's inky surface like a shattered mirror. The French Quarter had quieted, its revelry fading into the hum of cicadas and the distant clatter of a streetcar. Bayou Bliss was empty now, its dining room a graveyard of overturned chairs and lipstick-stained wineglasses. The air thick with the ghost of cayenne and charred oak. Marie Dubois stood alone in the kitchen, her hands wrist deep in soapy water, scrubbing a cast-iron pan as if she could scour away the dread gnawing at her bones. The restaurant's pulse had stilled, but her heart raced, Lila's trembling words from an hour ago echoing in her mind like a funeral dirge. "Mama, Victor's gonna kill you." The girl's voice had cracked, her eyes wide with terror as she recounted Victor Landry's plot, overheard in the alley's shadows. Victor, the crime boss whose money tainted every dollar in her register, wanted her dead, and Antoine, her own brother, had stood by, silent as a snake, while the plan was forged. Marie's hands froze in the suds, the pan slipping from her grip with a dull clang. Her reflection wavered in the greasy water, a woman carved by years of fire and loss. Her dark eyes hollowed by betrayal. She'd built Bayou Bliss from nothing, pouring her soul into every roux, every spice, to create a legacy for Lila. But Antoine had poisoned it, turning her sanctuary into a lair for Victor's dirty cash. She'd swallowed her pride, her morals, for the sake of survival. But this was a knife in the gut. "How could you, Antoine?" she whispered to the empty kitchen, her voice a raw wound. The overhead light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the stainless steel counters, as if the restaurant itself mourned her trust. Lila was upstairs in their apartment above the restaurant, sent to bed with a forced promise that Marie would handle it. But sleep was a stranger to them both. Lila sat on her bed, her knees pulled to her chest, her piano untouched in the corner. The melody she'd played earlier, wild, soulful, born of the bayou, felt like a lifetime ago. Her fingers still trembled, not from the cold but from the weight of what she'd heard. Victor's voice, low and guttural, had slithered through the alley's damp air. "Marie's getting too curious. She's a liability. We end her, take the place for ourselves." And Antoine, her uncle, the man who'd once carried her on his shoulders through Mardi Gras parades, had said nothing. His silence was a betrayal louder than any shout. Lila's eyes burned with unshed tears, her breath hitching as she clutched a worn photo of her mother, smiling in her chef's coat, oblivious to the noose tightening around her. "I should have stopped him," Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. "I should have screamed." Downstairs, Marie paced the kitchen, her boots clicking against the tiled floor like a metronome counting down to disaster. The bourbon bottle on the counter gleamed, tempting her to drown the pain. But she pushed it away. She needed clarity, not numbness. Lila's words had painted a vivid picture. Victor's men in the alley, their cigarette smoke curling like specters. Antoine's bowed head as he let the death sentence pass. Marie's fingers curled into fists, her nails biting into her palms until they drew blood. She'd raised Antoine after their parents drowned in a bayou flood, sacrificing her youth to keep him fed, clothed, alive. She'd forgiven his schemes, his gambling, his lies, but this was unforgivable. "You sold me out," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "My own blood, The back door creaked open, and Marie spun, her heart lurching. Antoine stepped inside, his suit rumpled, his face slick with sweat despite the night's chill. His eyes darted around the kitchen, as if expecting Victor's men to leap from the shadows. "Marie," he said, his voice low, urgent, "we gotta talk." His charm was gone, replaced by a jittery edge that made her skin crawl. She crossed her arms, her gaze ablade. "Talk? Now you wanna talk, Antoine? After you let Victor plan my funeral?" Her words cut through the air, sharp and venomous. Antoine flinched, his hands raised as if to ward off a blow. "It ain't like that, Cher. I was protectin' us. You don't cross Victor Landry, you know that." Marie stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Protectin' us? You stood there while he said he'd kill me. Antoine, you stood there and did nothing." Her eyes burned, tears threatening but held back by sheer will. Antoine's mouth opened, then closed, his excuses crumbling under her stare. "I was gonna warn you," he stammered. "I swear, Marie, I just needed time." "Time?" she snapped, slamming her hand on the counter, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "You had time to drag my restaurant into his filth, to sell my life for a payout. What's your price, Antoine? How much was my blood worth?" He backed away, his face pale, his hands trembling. "You don't understand, Marie. Victor's got eyes everywhere. If I'd said anything, you'd be dead instead of me," she finished, her voice cold as the river outside. "Don't pretend you're a martyr. You're a coward." The words hung between them, heavy as the humid air. Antoine's eyes flickered with something, guilt, fear, maybe both, but he said nothing. The silence was a confession, and it broke something in Marie. She turned away, her hands shaking, the kitchen's heat suffocating. "Get out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before I do something I can't undo." Antoine hesitated, his shadow looming on the wall like a vulture. Then he turned and slipped out the back door, the creak of its hinges a final note in their fractured bond. Marie sank to the floor, her back against the counter, her breath ragged. The restaurant, her pride, her home, felt like a tomb. Upstairs, Lila listened to the silence, her heart pounding with the certainty that nothing would ever be the same. Outside, the Mississippi flowed on, its whispers carrying the weight of secrets yet to spill. As the darkness closed in around Bayou Bliss, the dawn broke over New Orleans like a bruise, its gray light seeping through the French Quarter's narrow streets, painting the cobblestones in shades of ash and regret. Bayou Bliss stood silent, its windows dark, the air still heavy with the scent of spilled wine and betrayal from the night before. Marie Dubois paced the dining room, her boots scuffing the polished oak floor, each step a drumbeat of rage and dread. Her confrontation with Antoine hours ago had left her raw, her heart a jagged wound. His silence in the face of Victor Landry's plot to kill her, his own sister, burned hotter than any kitchen fire. The restaurant, her sanctuary, her legacy for Lila, was now a cage, its walls closing in with every tick of the ancient clock above the bar. The jukebox, usually alive with Zydeco, stood mute, its neon glow extinguished, as if it knew the storm that was coming. Marie's hands trembled, not from fear but from a fury so deep it felt like it could split the earth. "You'll pay, Antoine," she whispered to the empty room, her voice a low growl, her dark eyes glinting like polished obsidian in the dim light. The back door slammed open, and Antoine stumbled in, his tailored suit now creased and stained, his face gaunt, eyes wild with the desperation of a cornered animal. The bourbon on his breath hit Marie like a slap, mingling with the kitchen's lingering scent of garlic and thyme. "Marie, listen to me," he slurred, his voice cracking as he gripped the doorframe for balance. "We can fix this. I'll talk to Victor, make him see reason." "Reason?" Marie's laugh was a sharp, bitter thing, slicing through the air like a chef's knife. She stepped toward him, her fists clenched, her body taut as a bowstring. "You think Victor Landry, the man who's been bleeding this city dry, gives a damn about reason? You stood there, Antoine, while he planned to put me in the ground. My own brother." Her voice rose, trembling with a rage that shook the glasses on the tables, their faint clink a chorus to her pain. Antoine's face crumpled, his charm eroded by guilt and panic. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Cher," he pleaded, his hands raised as if to ward off her words. "I thought I could control it, keep us safe. Victor's got power, Marie, power we can't fight." She advanced, her eyes blazing, her voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. "Safe? You turned my restaurant into his filthy playground. Antoine, every dollar I earned, every plate I served, tainted by your greed, and now you think you can beg your way out? Her words were venom, each one landing like a lash. Antoine backed into the kitchen, his shoulder brushing against a shelf, knocking over a canister of cooking oil that hit the floor with a metallic thud. The air grew thick, the faint hiss of a gas line from the old stove unnoticed in the heat of their clash. You don't get it, Antoine shouted, his voice breaking as he stumbled against the counter, his hands flailing. Victor would have killed us both if I hadn't played along. He lunged forward, desperate to make her understand, but his arm caught a stack of pans, sending them crashing to the floor. A spark leapt from the faulty stove, a tiny flicker of light that met the spilled oil and the leaking gas. The world erupted, a fireball roared through the kitchen, a beast of flame and heat that shattered windows and devoured the walls of Bayou Bliss. Marie screamed, throwing herself to the floor as the blast singed her hair, her chef's coat smoldering. Antoine staggered, coughing, his face blackened with soot as he scrambled for the back door. In the alley, Victor's men, stationed to guard a shipment of laundered cash, screamed as the inferno swallowed them. Their cries lost in the deafening roar. Marie crawled through the smoke, her lungs burning, her eyes streaming as she reached the alley, collapsing against the cool brick wall. Antoine was there, gasping, his suit torn, his face a mask of terror. Marie, I didn't, he choked. But she cut him off, her voice raw as she dragged herself to her feet. Don't, you did this. Her words were a death knell, her gaze searing through the haze. Sirens wailed in the distance, red and blue lights pulsing through the dawn as firefighters battled the blaze. Bayou Bliss was a skeleton now, its heart gutted, its walls charred black. The cash in the back room, Victor's dirty money, was ash, along with his men. Antoine stared at the wreckage, his hands shaking, then turned and bolted into the morning fog, his shadow vanishing like a ghost. Marie stood alone, her body trembling, her chef's coat streaked with soot and blood from a cut on her arm she hadn't noticed. The restaurant was gone, her dream, her pride, reduced to cinders. Lila, safe at home, watched the news on a flickering TV screen, her hands pressed to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The anchor's voice droned, calling it a tragic accident. But Lila knew better. Her mother's rage, Antoine's betrayal, had sparked this ruin. Marie's eyes, fixed on the smoldering remains, burned with a new fire, not grief, but vengeance. Antoine had destroyed everything, and she would make him pay. The bayou whispered in the distance, its waters dark and hungry. As the city awoke to a dawn stained with loss, the bayou exhaled a damp, earthy breath, its cypress trees clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers under the bruised dusk of New Orleans. 2 days had passed since the inferno that gutted Bayou Bliss, leaving its charred bones to crumble in the French Quarter's heart. The city buzzed with whispers, tragedy, accident, arson, but Marie Dubois heard none of it. Her world had narrowed to a single, searing purpose, finding Antoine. Her brother, her betrayer, had fled into the shadows after the explosion, leaving her to choke on the ashes of her life. The restaurant, her sanctuary, was gone. Her daughter, Lila, was a ghost in their apartment, her eyes hollow with grief for the mother she no longer recognized. Marie's hands, once creators of joy through steaming plates of gumbo, now trembled with a cold, unyielding rage. She stood in the alley behind the ruins of Bayou Bliss, her chef's coat replaced by a worn jacket, her dark eyes scanning the horizon like a predator. The Mississippi's sluggish current murmured nearby, its waters dark as her thoughts, promising secrets and vengeance. She'd tracked Antoine to a decrepit motel on the bayou's edge, a sagging relic called the Gator's Rest, its neon sign flickering like a dying pulse. The air was thick with the reek of swamp rot and cheap whiskey, the kind of place where dreams went to drown. Marie's boots crunched on the gravel lot as she approached room 12, her heart a drumbeat of fury and resolve. In her bag, she carried a small metal tin, its contents a lethal alchemy, cyanide, procured from a disgraced pharmacist in the quarter, its bitter almond scent masked by the spices she'd perfected over decades. She knocked, her knuckles sharp against the peeling door, and Antoine's voice, slurred, ragged, came from within. "Who's there?" he croaked, fear threading his words. Marie's lips curled into a smile that held no warmth. "It's me, Cher," she said, her voice smooth as molasses, laced with a venom only she could taste. Open the door. The door creaked open, revealing Antoine, a wreck of the man he'd been. His suit was gone, replaced by a stained t-shirt and jeans. His face gaunt, eyes bloodshot from bourbon and paranoia. The room was a sty, empty bottles, crumpled cigarette packs, a mattress sagging under the weight of his guilt. Marie, he gasped, stumbling back, his hands raised as if to shield himself from her gaze. I didn't mean for it to happen. The fire, Victor's men, it was an accident. His voice cracked, pleading, but Marie's eyes were stone. Unyielding, she stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click that echoed like a guillotine's fall. An accident? She said, her voice low, dangerous, each word a shard of glass. You sold me to Victor. Antoine, you stood there while he planned my death. And when it all burned, you ran. Don't talk to me about accidents. Antoine collapsed onto a rickety chair, his hands raking through his hair, his breath hitching. I was scared, Marie. Victor would have killed me too. I thought I could fix it. Get us out. His eyes darted to the window, as if expecting Victor's men to materialize from the swamp's haze. Marie laughed, a sound sharp and cold as a winter wind. Fix it? You destroyed everything I built. Everything I loved. Bayou Bliss is gone. Antoine, Lila can't even look at me. And you think you can just beg your way free? She set her bag on the table, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial, as she pulled out a small pot, a burner, and ingredients she'd carried like a soldier's kit, tomatoes, onions, peppers, shrimp, and her secret weapon, hidden in the tin. What are you doing? Antoine asked, his voice trembling as she lit the burner, the blue flame casting shadows that danced like specters on the motel's stained walls. Cookin', Marie said, her tone eerily calm, her hands moving with the precision of a ritual. She diced onions, their sharp scent mingling with the room's stale air, and sautéed them with peppers, the sizzle a soft hymn to her vengeance. You always loved my étouffée, didn't you? Cher said it was the best thing you ever tasted. Antoine's eyes widened, confusion warring with fear. Marie, please, we can start over. I'll make it right. There's no startin' over. She cut him off, her voice ablaze as she stirred the pot, the rich aroma of tomatoes and cayenne filling the room. You took my life. Now you'll eat your last meal. She sprinkled the cyanide into the sauce, her hands steady, her heart a furnace of cold fire. The poison dissolved, invisible, its deadly promise hidden in the dish's vibrant red. She plated the étouffée, the shrimp glistening, the sauce perfect, and set it before Antoine with a smile that chilled the air. Eat, she said, her voice soft but commanding. A queen delivering a death sentence. Antoine stared at the plate, his hands shaking, suspicion flickering in his eyes. But hunger, or perhaps a desperate need to believe in her mercy, won out. He took a bite, then another, his face softening with a ghost of pleasure. God, Marie, it's perfect, he murmured, his voice thick with nostalgia and booze. She watched, silent, as he ate, each spoonful a step toward oblivion. Within minutes, his fork clattered to the table, his breath seizing, his eyes wide with realization. Marie, he gasped, clutching his chest, but she only watched, her face a mask of ice as he slumped forward, lifeless, the plate half empty before him. Marie moved with the precision of a chef plating her final dish. She spilled bourbon across the table, knocked over a chair, scattered pills from Antoine's stash to craft the scene, a broken man, undone by guilt, dead by his own hand. The motel room was a stage, and she was its director, ensuring every detail sang of tragedy, not murder. She stepped back, her hands steady now, the rage that had consumed her cooling into a hollow ache. The bayou outside whispered, its waters lapping at the shore, indifferent to the blood it had claimed. Marie left the motel, her bag lighter, her soul heavier, the dish she'd served a cold, poetic vengeance. But as she walked into the night, the weight of Lila's horrified gaze, her daughter's inevitable judgment, settled over her like a shroud, darker than the swamp itself. The dawn over New Orleans was a fragile thing, its pale gold light trembling on the Mississippi's surface like a promise too broken to keep. The French Quarter stirred, its streets littered with the ghosts of last night's revelry, crushed beads, spilled cups, the faint echo of a trumpet fading into the mist. But for Marie Dubois, the city's pulse was a dull throb, drowned out by the weight of her deeds. She stood in the doorway of their apartment above the ruins of Bayou Bliss, her hands raw from scrubbing away the scent of shrimp étouffée and cyanide. Her dark eyes hollowed by a grief sharper than any knife. 3 days had passed since she'd left Antoine's body in that Bayou motel. His death staged as a suicide. The papers calling it a tragic end to a man undone by the fire that claimed the restaurant. The police had asked their questions, nodded at her tears, and moved on, blind to the cold vengeance that had guided her hand. But Lila, her daughter, saw everything. The girl's silence was a judgment. Her once warm gaze now a wall of ice that Marie couldn't breach. The apartment was a tomb, its air thick with unsaid words. The creak of the floorboards a requiem for the family they'd been. Marie's chef's coat hung on a hook by the door, untouched, its pristine white now a mockery of the blood on her hands. The kitchen table held a cold cup of chicory coffee, its surface rippling as a streetcar rumbled past, the vibration rattling a framed photo of Lila at her piano, her smile a memory from a life that felt stolen. Marie's fingers traced the frame, her heart twisting with a pain that burned hotter than the inferno that had gutted Bayou Bliss. She'd destroyed Antoine, outwitted Victor Landry, whose empire was crumbling without his men or money. But the cost was her daughter, her reason. Her light, Lila, 18 and fierce as the bayou itself, had barely spoken since the fire. Her music silenced, her eyes haunted by the truth she'd pieced together. Marie had seen it last night, the way Lila's gaze lingered on her hands, as if searching for traces of poison, of betrayal. You know, don't you? Marie had whispered, her voice cracking in the dark of their living room. Lila had turned away, her silence louder than any scream. Now, Lila stood in her bedroom, her back to the door, stuffing clothes into a worn duffel bag. Her piano scores, handwritten, smudged with years of passion, were tucked carefully inside. The only pieces of New Orleans she'd take with her. The room was a shrine to her dreams, a cracked metronome, a poster of Billie Holiday, a string of Mardi Gras beads dangling from the bedpost. But the air was heavy, the walls closing in with the weight of her mother's choices. Lila's hands shook, not from fear but from a grief so deep it felt like drowning. She'd loved Marie fiercely, worshipped her strength, her fire, but the woman who'd poisoned Antoine wasn't her mother. That woman was a stranger, her soul twisted by vengeance into something cold, unrecognizable. Lila's breath hitched, a sob catching in her throat as she zipped the bag, the sound sharp in the quiet. Marie stepped into the doorway, her boots soft on the hardwood, her heart pounding like a drum in a funeral march. Lila, she said, her voice low, pleading, don't do this. Lila froze, her shoulders stiffening, but she didn't turn. The silence stretched, taut as a wire, until Lila spoke, her voice raw, trembling with a fury she'd held back too long. Don't do what, Mama? Leave? Or stay and pretend I don't know what you did? She spun to face Marie, her eyes blazing, tears streaming down her cheeks. You killed him, Antoine, my uncle. You cooked him a meal and watched him die. The words were a blade, each one slicing through Marie's chest. She flinched, her hands rising as if to shield herself. But there was no defense against the truth. Lila, I had to, she whispered, her voice breaking. He betrayed us. He let Victor plan to kill me. Burned our home, our life. I had no choice. Lila's laugh was bitter, sharp as broken glass. No choice? You had a choice, Mama. You could have gone to the police. Could have run. Could have trusted me. But you chose blood. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss, her eyes searching Marie's face for the woman she'd lost. I heard you that night, after the fire, muttering about making him pay. I saw the look in your eyes when you came back from that motel. You didn't just kill Antoine, you killed us. Marie staggered, her back hitting the doorframe, her breath shallow. The room seemed to tilt, the walls leaning in, the air thick with the scent of burnt dreams. I did it for you, she said, her voice desperate, a plea to the daughter slipping through her fingers. For our future, to keep you safe. Lila shook her head, her braids swaying, her face etched with pain. Safe? I'll never feel safe again. Not with you. Lila grabbed her bag, slinging it over her shoulder, and pushed past Marie, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. Marie followed, her voice rising, cracking with panic. Lila, please, don't leave me. You're all I have. The words echoed in the stairwell, raw and ragged, but Lila didn't stop. At the door, she paused, her hand on the knob, her back to her mother. You're not the woman I knew, she said, her voice soft now, final. A farewell carved in stone. Goodbye, Mama. The door opened, letting in the city's hum, street musicians. Laughter. The clatter of life moving on, and then closed. The click a gunshot in Marie's heart. Marie sank to the floor, her hands clutching her chest. A wail rising in her throat but dying unspoken. The apartment was silent, the absence of Lila's music a wound that bled endlessly. Outside, Lila boarded a bus, her face pressed to the window as New Orleans receded, its spires and swamps fading into memory. Her fingers traced the edge of a piano score, a melody she'd play somewhere far away, free from the blood on the bayou. Bayou Bliss was rebuilt by strangers, its soul lost, while Marie drifted to a dive bar on the city's edge, a line cook slinging greasy burgers. Her name forgotten, the bayou whispered her story. A cautionary tale of love turned to ash, a vengeance that cost more than it claimed. And somewhere, Lila's music soared, a song of freedom, untethered from the mother she'd left behind. If you find the story interesting, please like and share this video and leave a comment with your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Revenge and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos.